It was a calm Saturday morning, the kind that made living in our countryside estate feel like a dream. The sun poured golden light across our gravel driveway, and the birds were busy with their gossip in the trees. I was in the garden pruning my late mother's roses, while my wife, Elena, sipped her morning tea on the porch swing. She wore her usual, simple jeans, a white linen blouse, and her hair tucked in a bun. Elena never cared for the glam. She had a quiet elegance, the kind that doesn't scream for attention but earns it without effort. We had moved into the Willow Creek gated community only a few months ago, wanting to settle somewhere peaceful after years of city chaos. Despite the HOA's strict rules and neighborhood politics, we figured we'd stay under the radar. Elena wasn't flashy. Neither was I. We had money, sure, but we didn't feel the need to shout it from the rooftops. That morning, Elena decided to take a walk and check the mailbox near the front gate. It was a decent stroll, and she liked the fresh air. As she neared the gate, I saw her pause just for a second, then continue slowly. From where I stood, I could barely make out another figure near her. It was Linda, though she insisted everyone call her Ms. Linda Rockwell, the HOA president. Tall, blonde, and armored in a blazer with pearls that probably hadn't been real since 1987. The neighborhood knew her as Karen Supreme. She had appointed herself the guardian of community image, and from what I'd seen, she had an opinion about everything and everyone. I didn't think much of the interaction until Elena returned, quieter than usual. She placed the mail on the kitchen counter and didn't say much. I noticed her cheeks slightly red, whether from the sun or something else, I wasn't sure. "What did she say?" I asked casually. Elena hesitated, then smiled tightly. She asked if I was the new maid. Said I should let the lady of the house know she's violating HOA decorum by letting staff loiter near the main gate. I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard right. "She thought you were the maid." "Oh no," Elena said with a faint laugh. She was sure, even told me I looked a little plain for a housekeeper in this neighborhood. My grip tightened around the garden shears. I didn't usually let things get to me, but this wasn't going to slide. I spent the rest of the day stewing over Linda's words. My wife may not flaunt herself in designer labels or carry a Louis Vuitton bag, but to mistake her for household staff and then insult her appearance. That wasn't ignorance. That was cruelty dressed up as elitism. Elena had always carried herself with grace, and she brushed it off, saying, "People like that aren't worth the trouble." But I could see the sting in her eyes, tucked behind that smile she gave me. Linda didn't just make a mistake. She looked at my wife, assessed her appearance, and decided she was beneath her. That wasn't just wrong, that was war bait. By Monday morning, the neighborhood WhatsApp group was already buzzing. Linda had posted a long message reminding everyone about the HOA dress code, especially when outsiders or staff are seen near the front gate. It wasn't subtle. She was clearly doubling down. One neighbor replied with a passive thumbs up, and another, clearly intimidated, sent a thanks for the reminder. But I wasn't about to let this pass as some misguided attempt at keeping standards. I decided to confront Linda directly, not aggressively, just enough to give her a chance to retract. I walked to her house that afternoon, rang the bell, and waited. Her door opened with the kind of forced surprise only practiced snobs can manage. "Oh, yes," she said, already squinting like I was trying to sell her magazine subscriptions. "I think you owe my wife an apology," I said evenly. She blinked. "Your wife?" Her tone was syrupy with mock confusion. "Oh, do you mean the lady by the gate? I simply assumed, well, with that attire and no badge, she didn't look local." "She lives in the house with me. She's my wife," I said, jaw clenched. Linda tilted her head and gave me the kind of smile people save for toddlers or the deeply pitied. "Well, perhaps she could try a little harder to meet the standards here. Image matters, you know, people talk." I said nothing, just nodded once and walked away. Because in that moment, I realized something crucial. Karen, excuse me, Linda wasn't going to back down. She was convinced she was the star of this community, the gatekeeper of some imagined aristocracy. She saw Elena as plain, therefore lesser. And she saw herself as the queen of a kingdom she didn't realize she'd just declared war in. She had no idea who we were or what we could do. And I was about to show her. The next week, Linda's petty tyranny escalated like clockwork. She started sending official HOA violation letters, hand-delivered, of course. One was for improper landscaping, because apparently our heirloom rose bushes weren't uniform enough. Another cited Elena for inappropriate footwear for communal pathways. That one made me laugh out loud. Elena had been wearing white sneakers. We even got a warning about suspicious loitering when Elena sat under the oak tree near the sidewalk with her sketchbook. She was an artist, not a criminal, but Linda was clearly on a mission to remind us we did fit the mold. Every letter was signed with her overly loopy signature, MS. Linda Rockwell, HOA President Willow, if that meant something outside the gates of our neighborhood. Elena tried to laugh it off. She was the calm in the storm always. She's just insecure, she said while sketching the koi pond in our backyard. People like her only feel tall when they're standing on someone else. But I could see her joy getting chipped away, piece by piece. That lightness in her eyes dimmed just a little every time another envelope arrived or Linda glared at her from behind her giant sunglasses. One afternoon, I caught Linda in the act. She was out walking her tiny, rat-like dog and paused to take a photo of our trash bins, which had been left out for maybe 20 extra minutes. Her phone was practically shaking with excitement. She didn't notice me until I stepped onto the porch. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, loud enough for the neighbors 2 doors down to hear. She smiled sweetly. "Just making sure the community stays up to code. We all have to do our part." "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. "And I'm sure you'll want to make sure everyone is equally informed, like the Sandersons who left their Christmas lights up until March, or the Millers who never trimmed their hedges." Linda's smile faltered just a bit. "Well, we can't catch everything." "No," I said, stepping closer, "but it's interesting what you do catch." She walked off without another word, her dog yapping behind her like a tiny, furry insult. But that was it. That was the moment I decided this needed to stop. She wasn't just annoying. She was targeting my wife in a way that was deeply personal and quietly cruel. Linda thought she was policing appearances. What she didn't realize was that she had opened the door to something far more powerful than her HOA title and her condescending little letters. She thought Elena was plain. She thought I was passive. She was about to learn we were neither. That evening, while Elena painted on the patio with soft jazz playing in the background, I opened my laptop and got to work. It was time to shift gears. No more quiet tolerance. I started with research deep, focused, methodical. I combed through the HOA's bylaws, and it didn't take long to find what I was hopping for. Linda had been bending the rules like balloon animals. Her own hedges extended 6 inches past the allowable height limit. Her backyard gazebo, installed last spring, had no approved permit on file. And her so-called security dog was in violation of the no-breed exceptions policy. That yappy gremlin was technically classified as a nuisance breed under county code. I documented everything. Next, I called in a few favors. What Linda didn't know was that I hadn't always lived this quiet life. Before the countryside and the koi ponds, I'd spent 2 decades running private logistics and security firms for high-end clients. I still had contacts, and not the sketchy kind. The kind who worked with precision, legality, and quiet efficiency. One call to Marcus, my old operations manager, and I had our private security team on standby, fully licensed, dressed to the nines, and driving sleek black SUVs. Not because we needed security, but because of the message it would send. Elena noticed my sudden burst of activity but didn't pry. She trusted me, and she knew me well enough to sense the gears turning behind my calm exterior. "You're planning something, aren't you?" she asked one night, curling up beside me on the couch. I smiled, something tasteful. Her laugh was low and amused. "Please don't get us kicked out." "I won't," I promised. "I'll just make sure Linda remembers who she's dealing with." That week, I also met with the HOA's financial officer, Franklin, a nervous man who always looked like he was trying to escape his own tie. I requested a review of all HOA decisions from the past year, especially those concerning fines and enforcement. "Of course, but why?" he asked. "Because I believe there's a pattern of discriminatory enforcement," I said plainly. "And I'd hate to involve an attorney over something that could be handled internally." Franklin's face went pale. I'll get the files to you. As the pieces began falling into place, I felt a shift. The power dynamic had begun to change. Linda didn't know it yet, but her little empire of HOA intimidation was crumbling. She wanted to play gatekeeper. I was about to let her see who really owned the keys. The trap had to be elegant, not loud, not aggressive, just enough to tip the scales and let gravity do the rest. I started laying the groundwork with a quiet precision Linda would never see coming. First, we scheduled a property reassessment. It wasn't necessary, but the timing was perfect. The local officials arrived in sharp suits, clipboards in hand, and spent nearly 2 hours on our property. Linda, of course, spotted them from her upstairs window. She came outside twice, pretending to water her already dying hydrangeas, peeking over like a hawk with a superiority complex. The next morning, Elena took her usual walk. But this time, she wore the same outfit, jeans, blouse, hair in a bun, and something new, a silver name tag that read Principal Investor Evsia Holdings. The title was real, too. Elena was a silent partner in a health tech company that had just opened a research wing downtown. Linda was outside, of course, lurking near the gate with her ridiculous dog in its rhinestone leash. She squinted as Elena passed, likely trying to process the name tag. Elena gave her a polite nod, never slowing her steps. But the real show was scheduled for the next day. At exactly noon, 3 black Rolls-Royce Cullinans pulled through the gates, one after the other. Behind them, 2 sleek black SUVs rolled in and parked in front of our driveway. Our private security team stepped out, dressed in tailored suits, wearing earpieces, looking like they were protecting royalty. Linda stormed out onto her front lawn, fuming and confused. She crossed the street in record time, waving her HOA clipboard like a weapon. "Excuse me, what's going on here? Are you hosting a political figure? This is a residential area." One of the security team, Marcus himself, stepped forward with practiced professionalism. "We're here on behalf of the Ashford family for a private estate review and transition briefing." Linda blinked like she'd been slapped with a thesaurus. "Transition? What transition?" "Ownership and management," Marcus said coolly. "They've recently increased their holdings. Ms. Elena Ashford is overseeing several initiatives related to security and community infrastructure." Linda's jaw fell open. She looked from Marcus to the vehicles to Elena, who was now stepping outside in her usual understated elegance, sipping tea like she hadn't just upended the HOA monarchy. We had said nothing, no speeches, no announcements. But the message was clear. And Karen's sorry Linda was finally starting to feel it. Linda didn't know what to do with herself. She stood there frozen, mouth slightly agape, eyes darting between the fleet of luxury vehicles and the poised woman standing calmly in her linen blouse. Elena didn't even acknowledge her. That, more than anything, seemed to rattle Linda's already fragile sense of control. The neighborhood group chat exploded within an hour. "Did anyone else see the black SUVs? Is that private security? I heard Elena owns some kind of company." By evening, rumors were running wild. Some thought we were royalty. Others were convinced we'd bought the HOA. We didn't correct a single one. Let Linda stew in that pot she brewed herself. But the best part, the real revenge wasn't the cars or the security. It was the meeting. 2 days later, during the monthly HOA board meeting, where Linda usually held court like a suburban Cleopatra, I showed up with Elena beside me, calm and collected. Franklin, the once nervous financial officer, handed me the floor with a nod and absolutely no eye contact with Linda. "I've reviewed the HOA's recent enforcement actions," I said, flipping open a binder. "There's a clear pattern of selective rule application and personal bias, primarily targeting my wife." The room went silent. Linda opened her mouth, but I raised a hand, still smiling. "I've also discovered multiple violations on your own property, Ms. Rockwell. And since we've now retained legal counsel, I thought it would be best to resolve this internally before filing a formal discrimination complaint." A neighbor coughed. Someone else muttered, "Damn." Linda's face turned the color of a boiled beet. You can't. This is ridiculous." Actually, Elena said, her voice gentle but firm, what's ridiculous is assuming someone's worth by their outfit or their title. Linda stood, trying to salvage what little dignity she had. Well, perhaps I made an error in judgment, but I was only upholding standards. You were upholding ego, I said, calmly closing the binder. And now those standards will apply to everyone, equally. By the end of the meeting, a vote was passed to initiate a formal review of Linda's conduct as HOA president. 3 of the other board members sided with us. Turns out, no one really liked her. They were just scared. Until now. As we walked out, the same neighbors who had once smiled awkwardly now waved and said hello. One of them even whispered, "About time someone took her down a peg." But the cherry on top. The next morning, Linda's house received an official HOA notice, her own HOA, citing multiple violations. It was signed by the board and approved by Franklin. Linda's reaction was everything I'd hoped for, and more. The moment that official HOA notice landed on her doorstep, her world started to unravel in the most poetic fashion imaginable. It began with denial. She stormed across her lawn, straight to Franklin's house, red-faced and ranting loud enough for the neighborhood birds to scatter. "You can't cite me. I am the HOA," she shouted, ignoring the fact that she'd just received the same paperwork she'd gleefully slapped on everyone else's doors for years. Franklin, now armed with a spine and a folder of complaints, politely informed her that the board had voted to place her under conduct review. "And," he added with a slight twitch of a smile, "we found you exceeded the maximum structure limit on your gazebo by 17 inches. That's a Class B violation." Her jaw dropped so hard, I thought it might hit the sidewalk. Next came the outrage phase. She emailed the entire HOA mailing list, accusing us of orchestrating a hostile takeover and bringing corporate corruption into a sacred residential space. One neighbor replied with a gif of popcorn. Another just said, "You really messed with the wrong couple, huh?" Then came humiliation. The security team had become a regular sight. Though no longer necessary, they were now part of the charm. Neighbors were suddenly friendlier, more respectful. Several even asked Elena for investment advice. They weren't doing it to flatter her. They'd simply realized she wasn't just the quiet lady at the gate. She was the power behind it. Meanwhile, Linda's influence began to erode. Her fake smiles grew tighter, her pearls clacked louder with every meeting she tried, and failed, to dominate. Her supporters trickled away, one by one, until it was just her and her leash goblin dog left watching from their window. At the next monthly meeting, Linda arrived late, hopping to reclaim her seat at the head of the table. Instead, she found it had been reassigned. She was now just a member, pending disciplinary action. She sat in the back, seething, while Elena calmly presented a new community initiative, free art classes for neighborhood kids. It passed unanimously. And the final blow. That Friday, a moving company pulled up in front of Linda's house. Rumor had it, she was relocating to somewhere with more refined standards. The neighborhood watched from their porches as her furniture was carted away, one HOA citation still taped to her garage door. As she drove off in her dusty Rolls-Royce, windows up, lips pursed, no one waved goodbye. Not even her dog looked back. With Linda gone, Willow Creek began to feel like the peaceful community we'd originally hoped for. The air seemed lighter, the sidewalks friendlier, and the neighborhood WhatsApp group turned from battleground to bake sale planning committee. People greeted us by name now, not because of fear or obligation, but because they finally saw us, really saw us. Elena, ever humble, didn't revel in Linda's downfall. But she did smile a little more often, her sketchbook now filled with scenes from our own front yard. Kids from the neighborhood came by for her art classes every Saturday morning, sitting cross-legged on picnic blankets with their watercolors while she guided them with the same grace that had always been her quiet strength. As for me, I went back to trimming roses and fixing the koi pond filter, content to be in the background. The security team came less often now, only showing up when we hosted the occasional investor barbecue or charity planning session. But their presence had already done its job. The message had been received. The new HOA president, a retired teacher named Gloria, stopped by with fresh muffins and an apology for the madness of the past. She chuckled nervously and added, "Honestly, we were all just a little scared of her. But what you and your wife did, it changed everything." Elena simply replied, "It wasn't about power, it was about respect." And that was the truth. The Rolls-Royce that once symbolized Linda's ego now sat at a local dealership, gathering dust, according to Franklin. Poetic, really. Meanwhile, the rest of the community started following the actual rules, not just the ones Linda cherry-picked. Fairness became the new norm. People began planting flowers again. Kids played without fear of being cited for excessive noise. Even the HOA meetings became civil, believe it or not. One evening, Elena and I sat on our porch swing, watching the sun dip below the trees, her head resting on my shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "I still remember exactly what she said that day." "I do too." "But I'm glad she said it," Elena whispered, "because it reminded me dignity doesn't wear labels, and some people need a Rolls-Royce to feel important, others just need peace." I kissed her forehead, and we both laughed as a couple of kids chased each other across our front lawn. Linda's legacy, a cautionary tale. Ours, a quiet kind of justice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. And as the stars blinked awake overhead, it was clear, peace hadn't just returned. It had leveled up.